On a chilly December morning, the world of Alexander Monroe, a self-made millionaire, was shaken to its core by a single remark. His glamorous partner, Claudia, had barely glanced at the ragged boy sitting on the sidewalk when she carelessly whispered, "He looks exactly like your son." The words cut through the air like a blade, reopening a wound Alexander thought he had buried 5 long years ago. His son, Daniel, had died of cancer at just 10 years old. And now, right in front of him, stood another boy, the same age, with the same curly hair, the same tilt of the head, the same quiet gaze that once belonged to Daniel. The boy clutched a piece of cardboard with shaky handwriting, his oversized clothes hanging loosely from his thin frame, his sneakers riddled with holes. Yet what captured Alexander's attention wasn't just the striking resemblance, it was the dignity in the child's posture, a quiet strength that seemed far too mature for someone his age. "Do you have any change, sir?" the boy asked softly. His name was Elias, and despite the hardship written across his worn clothes and tired eyes, there was something luminous about him. Something that whispered resilience. Claudia tugged at Alexander's arm, annoyed. "Let's go, darling. Don't waste your time here. He's just after money." But Alexander couldn't look away. Memories flooded back, the hospital corridors, Daniel's frail smile, the way he always thought of others even when he was suffering. Elias carried that same unbreakable spirit, and it unsettled Alexander in ways he couldn't explain. As the wind scattered papers from a passerby's grocery bags, Elias darted forward, gathering them with care, and returning them without expectation of thanks. That simple act of kindness broke something open inside Alexander. He saw, in this child, not a beggar, but a mirror of the humanity he himself had lost in the wake of grief and success. At that moment, the bustling city noise seemed to fade. Claudia's shallow protests no longer mattered. What stood before Alexander was not chance. It was destiny's way of asking him who he truly was and what kind of man he wanted to be. On the busy sidewalks of the city, Claudia's heels clicked impatiently against the concrete as she folded her arms and sighed. To her, the boy squatting near the entrance of the shopping center was nothing more than a nuisance. His clothes hung in tatters, his sneakers barely clinging to his feet, and a cardboard sign rested limply in his lap. "Alexander," she muttered, her voice sharp with irritation, "don't waste your time. He's just another street kid who knows how to look pitiful. They always have a story, and it always ends with them asking for more." Her words dripped with disdain, but Alexander barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on Elias, the boy whose presence stirred memories he thought were long gone. It wasn't just the uncanny resemblance to Daniel that unsettled him. It was the quiet dignity with which the boy sat, shoulders straight, despite the cold wind and hunger in his eyes. Elias didn't beg aggressively, nor did he wear the hardened mask many street children carried. Instead, he held himself as though he were more than his circumstances. As though his soul refused to be broken. The tension between Claudia and Elias became apparent almost instantly. Where she saw a parasite, Alexander saw possibility. And where she judged, Elias quietly disproved every prejudice with small, deliberate acts of kindness. The first moment came when an elderly man, his arms overloaded with grocery bags, stumbled as the wind tore a handful of receipts and papers from his hands. Before Alexander could react, Elias was already moving. He darted forward, gathering the fluttering sheets with careful hands, then returned them to the man with a soft smile. The boy asked for nothing in return. Instead, he helped rearrange the groceries so they would not fall again. The old man patted his shoulder in gratitude, but Elias merely nodded shyly and returned to his place on the pavement. Claudia scoffed audibly. "Don't be fooled, Alex. That's a performance. They're clever at these. Tricks make themselves look helpful, and suddenly you feel guilty enough to open your wallet. It's all manipulation." But Alexander wasn't convinced. He had watched Elias closely, and there was no calculation in the boy's eyes. The small kindness was genuine, instinctive, and utterly unselfish. Elias had acted not because someone was watching, but because it was simply who he was. As Alexander crouched to speak with him, Claudia pulled back as if the mere presence of poverty might soil her designer dress. "Honestly, this is beneath you," she hissed. "We are late for our reservation, and you're embarrassing yourself. Do you want people to think you've lost your mind, sitting here talking to a vagrant child?" Elias looked down at his lap, clearly used to hearing such remarks. But his silence carried no bitterness. There was only a quiet sadness in his expression, the kind worn by those who had long accepted that society often saw them as invisible, or worse, as unworthy. Trying to redirect the conversation, Alexander noticed a battered notebook beside the boy. "What do you write in there, Elias?" he asked. The boy hesitated, his fingers brushing the cover, as though protecting something precious. "Stories," he said at last, his voice almost apologetic. "Things I imagine, things I see. My mother taught me to write before she passed away. Sometimes I write about families who love their children. Or about heroes who help others. They're silly stories." "Really?" Alexander shook his head gently. "They're not silly. Stories are what keep us alive. They hold dreams when reality tries to take them away." Claudia rolled her eyes so hard it seemed they might get stuck. "Good grief, Alex. Philosophy. Lessons on the sidewalk. He's 10 years old, and living in rags. Do you really think scribbling in a notebook will change that? This is pathetic." Her words struck like venom, but Elias did not lash back. Instead, he hugged the notebook closer to his chest, as if it were both shield and lifeline. That small gesture of holding on to hope, however fragile, tugged at something deep within Alexander. He saw in Elias the same resilience Daniel had once shown in his hospital bed, smiling through pain, offering comfort to others even when he himself needed it most. And then came the revelation that silenced even Claudia. Elias, in his shy, halting way, revealed that he taught himself languages. With pride flickering in his voice, he explained that he had found old dictionaries in the trash, borrowed books when libraries allowed him, and watched films with subtitles to practice. He could speak Spanish, some French, and of course, English. His pronunciation was clumsy in places, but his determination was unmistakable. For Alexander, it was extraordinary. For Claudia, it was laughable. Languages? She sneered. "Don't tell me you're impressed, Alex. He's probably memorized a few phrases too. Impress soft-hearted people like you. This is how they get under your skin. And then what? He'll expect you to fund his grand education?" But Alexander didn't see a scammer. He saw brilliance struggling to breathe under the weight of poverty. He saw a boy who, despite every obstacle, refused to surrender his dreams. He saw Daniel's spark, the same intelligence, the same curiosity alive again in another child. In that moment, the gulf between Claudia and Elias became unbridgeable. She embodied cynicism, prejudice, and the shallow comforts of privilege. He embodied dignity, perseverance, and the quiet nobility of one who chooses kindness even when the world offers none in return. It was a clash not of individuals, but of values. Claudia's disdainful laughter echoed like the empty clink of champagne glasses at a party where nothing real was ever said. Elias's gentle smile, on the other hand, carried more weight than any fortune. And as Alexander watched them both, one dripping with scorn, the other shining with humble grace, he realized he stood at a crossroads. The contrast was stark, undeniable, and life-altering. A woman who measured worth in wealth and appearances, and a boy who measured it in compassion and knowledge. What Alexander chose in that moment would not only define his relationship with Claudia but also reveal the kind of man he truly was. The tension between them grew heavier with every passing second, as if the air itself had thickened around Alexander. Claudia's sharp voice echoed like shards of glass in his ears, but his gaze remained on Elias. The boy's eyes carried a familiar light, the same flame Daniel had once possessed, a mixture of curiosity, intelligence, and kindness that not even illness could extinguish. In Elias, Alexander didn't just see a struggling child on the streets. He saw a reflection of the son he had lost, a living reminder of everything he once held sacred but had slowly buried under layers of grief and ambition. "Alexander," Claudia snapped, tugging at his sleeve with growing impatience. "This is absurd. We have a reservation. Stop humiliating yourself in front of strangers." Her words barely touched him. The world seemed muted, except for Elias's soft voice, except for the flicker of Daniel's memory resurfacing in gestures so simple yet profound. The way Elias adjusted the straps of his worn backpack, the way he held his notebook as though it contained an entire universe. These were echoes of Daniel drawing cartoons in hospital waiting rooms, Daniel sketching recipes for the future he never lived to see. Alexander felt something shift deep inside. For years, he had drowned himself in work, expanding his restaurant empire, convincing himself that money and success could keep the silence at bay. He had pushed away pain, locked it in a vault, and let Claudia's shallow world of luxury distract him. But now, standing in front of Elias, he realized how far he had drifted from the man he once was. He had become numb, detached, afraid to feel. And Elias, this boy with tattered shoes and bright eyes, was tearing open the vault with nothing but kindness. "Have you eaten today?" Alexander asked gently. Elias shook his head, embarrassed, as though admitting hunger was shameful. Claudia threw up her hands in exasperation. "That's it, I'm done with this nonsense. Alex. Either you come with me right now, or I swear this relationship ends here. Do you hear me? Right here, in the middle of this filthy street." Her voice was sharp, commanding, the voice of someone used to bending situations to her will. But for once, Alexander didn't flinch. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. And for the first time in years, he saw her clearly. Behind the perfectly styled hair, the polished smile, the designer clothes, there was nothing but contempt, contempt for those who struggled, contempt for compassion, contempt for anything that did not shine with wealth. He remembered the countless dinners where she mocked waiters under her breath. The parties where she bragged about connections while sneering at those who didn't belong. He had excused it as vanity, as immaturity, but now he understood. Claudia's disdain wasn't a flaw. It was who she truly was. And in that clarity, the choice became simple. He looked back at Elias, who was already backing away timidly, sensing the storm brewing between the adults. "I don't want to cause trouble, sir," the boy murmured. "Thank you for talking to me." Alexander reached out and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're not causing trouble. You're reminding me of something I should never have forgotten." Claudia's face twisted in disbelief. "Are you insane? You're choosing this nobody over me? After everything I've given you?" Alexander's voice was calm, steadier than it had been in years. "You've given me appearances, Claudia. But he glanced at Elias, "he's given me something you never could. The truth. And the truth is, I've been living blind, forgetting what compassion feels like. Forgetting who I really am." The words silenced her for a moment, but only long enough for fury to boil over. "You'll regret this. When he steals from you, when he drags your name through the mud, don't come crawling back to me." But Alexander no longer heard her threats. For the first time, he felt free. The weight of years of compromise slid from his shoulders. This wasn't about charity. It wasn't about guilt. It was about recognizing a moment of destiny and choosing not to turn away. He turned fully toward Elias. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you something to eat." Claudia gasped, her face flushed with outrage. "So, it's over? Just like that? You're ending us? Here for a street kid?" Alexander met her eyes with quiet resolve. "No, Claudia. We ended long before this. I just didn't see it until now. Today, I finally understand that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. And I won't waste another day pretending otherwise." Claudia stood frozen, her mask of elegance cracking as she realized she had lost not to another woman of status, but to a child she considered beneath her. Her anger erupted in a final, venomous declaration. "You two deserve each other. Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, she stormed off, her heels clattering furiously against the pavement until she disappeared into the crowd. For a long moment, silence hung between Alexander and Elias. The boy shifted uneasily, glancing up at the man who had just severed ties with wealth and comfort for his sake. "Sir," Elias whispered, "I really don't want to ruin your life. Maybe I should just go." Alexander crouched so their eyes were level. "Elias, you've done the opposite. You've reminded me of the man I used to be, the man my son believed in. If I walk away from you, now, I lose myself forever. But if I walk with you, maybe both of us can find something worth living for again." Elias's lips trembled into a shy smile, the kind that carried both hope and disbelief. For the first time in years, Alexander felt his heart beat not with grief, but with purpose. He had made his choice, not just between Claudia and Elias, but between indifference and compassion, between emptiness and meaning. And as they walked side by side toward the restaurant, Alexander knew this moment would define the rest of his life. The restaurant Alexander chose was one he had frequented for years, an elegant Italian place, tucked away on a quiet street. It wasn't the kind of place a boy like Elias would ever imagine stepping into. As they entered, the warm aroma of baked bread and herbs filled the air, and Elias's eyes widened at the polished wooden floors, the crisp white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of cultured voices. He hesitated at the entrance, clutching his worn backpack tightly. "Sir, maybe I shouldn't," he began, but Alexander placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're my guest today. You deserve to be here as much as anyone else." The waiter, accustomed to Alexander's status, greeted him warmly, though his eyes flickered curiously at Elias's ragged appearance. Alexander noticed the boy shrink slightly under the weight of that glance, but he pretended not to see it. Instead, he gestured toward a corner booth. "Come. Sit. Order anything you'd like." Elias picked up the menu as if it were a sacred text. He mouthed each word silently, carefully, tracing the foreign names of dishes. Alexander quickly realized he wasn't just reading, he was studying, memorizing, testing himself. When the boy finally looked up, his eyes betrayed embarrassment. "Sir, everything looks expensive. Maybe I should just have bread." Alexander smiled gently. "No, Elias. Don't choose based on price. Choose what you truly want. Today, you eat like you belong here, because you do." For a long moment, Elias studied him, uncertain if he could believe such generosity. Then, with quiet courage, he pointed to a pasta dish. As they waited, Alexander leaned forward. "Tell me, Elias, what do you write in that notebook of yours?" The boy shifted, pulling the battered notebook from his bag. Its cover was frayed, pages filled with small, careful handwriting. "Stories," he admitted softly. "About people who help others. About families who stay together. Sometimes about places I've never been. I like imagining a world kinder than the one I see." Alexander turned a page, astonished by the complexity of the sentences. They weren't childish scribbles. They were structured, detailed, alive with imagination. He looked back at Elias. "This is extraordinary. How did you learn to write so well?" The boy shrugged. "Books. Old ones I found in the trash, sometimes borrowed from the UCAT library. My mother taught me before she died. I didn't want to forget, so I kept practicing." Alexander's throat tightened, but he pressed on. "And the languages? You mentioned Spanish earlier." Elias's cheeks flushed, but his eyes brightened. "Yes, Spanish, and some French. I try to teach myself. Dictionaries. Old movies with subtitles. Sometimes I copy whole paragraphs until I understand them. I practice speaking when no one's around." Alexander leaned back, overwhelmed. Here was a boy who had nothing, no parents, no home, no stability. Yet he had carved knowledge out of scraps, teaching himself languages. Most adults struggle to learn with tutors. "Would you show me?" Alexander asked, pulling out his phone and opening a translation app. "Speak to me in French. Anything you want." Elias hesitated, his hands trembling slightly. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. His voice, though shy, carried clear, fluid French sentences about his dreams of becoming a writer, about stories that could cross borders and inspire people. His pronunciation was careful, his grammar surprisingly accurate for someone who had never had formal lessons. The nearby tables grew quiet. Strangers turned to listen, their surprise evident. Among them sat an elegant woman with silver hair and a composed demeanor. She leaned closer, listening intently until Elias finished. Then she rose and approached their table. "Excuse me," she said in perfect English. "I couldn't help but overhear. My name is Dr. Marianne Leclerc. I'm a professor of linguistics at Columbia University." Elias froze, his face flushing crimson. Alexander straightened, intrigued. "Professor, this is Elias," he introduced warmly. Dr. Leclerc smiled at the boy. "Elias. That was remarkable. You speak French with the kind of intuition I rarely hear outside native speakers. Tell me, how did you learn?" Elias stammered, his humility evident. "Books, mostly. Old dictionaries, sometimes films. I talk to myself when I practice." The professor's eyes widened in admiration. "And English? Spanish?" "Yes, ma'am. Some of both." She exchanged a glance with Alexander, one that carried both surprise and excitement. "Have you ever taken a proficiency test?" Elias shook his head. "I couldn't afford it." "Well," she said firmly, "that is about to change. Columbia has a program for exceptional students in vulnerable situations. If you're interested, I'd like to arrange for you to take some assessments. Free of charge." Elias blinked, as though the words were too surreal to process. Me? At a university? Yes, you, she said, her voice warm but certain. Talent like yours deserves to be nurtured. For the first time, Alexander saw tears glisten in the boy's eyes. He looked at him as if asking permission to believe it. Alexander nodded, his own voice thick with emotion. Say yes, Elias. This is your chance. The boy whispered, almost afraid it might disappear if he spoke too loudly. Yes. I would be honored. The professor handed Alexander her card, promising to arrange everything. As she departed, the restaurant seemed to hum with possibility. Elias clutched the card as though it were a golden ticket. Later that week, the tests confirmed what Alexander already knew. Elias wasn't just good, he was exceptional. His scores shattered records. His linguistic skills dazzling even the most seasoned professors. At the final meeting, the academic council announced unanimously, Elias would receive a full scholarship. When the letter was placed in his trembling hands, Elias looked at Alexander, overwhelmed. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. No one has ever believed in me like this. Alexander placed a hand on his shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. Elias, you don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. Never stop believing in yourself. The world needs your voice. For the first time since Daniel's death, Alexander felt a sense of purpose, as if fate itself had intervened. He had once lost a son to tragedy, but perhaps life had given him another chance. Not to replace what was lost, but to honor it by helping someone else rise. And so began Elias's new journey, one that would take him far from the sidewalks of the city, and into the halls of one of the world's greatest universities. Claudia had always believed that her life was untouchable. For years, she had surrounded herself with the glittering world of expensive handbags, exclusive clubs, and friends who measured worth by the labels stitched on their clothes. She thought that her sharp tongue and biting remarks gave her power, that mocking those beneath her was a harmless indulgence of the elite. But arrogance has a way of blinding people to their own fragility, and Claudia was about to learn that the higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. 3 nights after her explosive fight with Alexander, she sat at the polished marble bar of the city's most exclusive club. A circle of her well-dressed friends surrounded her, glasses of champagne in hand, eager for the latest drama. Claudia, fueled by bitterness and humiliation, wasted no time delivering her version of the story. He's lost his mind, she declared loudly enough for half the lounge to hear. Alexander chose some filthy street kid over me. Can you believe it? A beggar. He thinks he's some hero, rescuing the poor, when really he's being played by a manipulative brat who knows how to look pitiful. Her friends gasped, some laughing uneasily. Encouraged, Claudia leaned closer, her words dripping venom. You know how these kids are. They're parasites. They'll steal your wallet the moment you look away. But no, apparently, that's the kind of company Alexander prefers. Now. Pathetic. What Claudia didn't notice was the young woman 2 tables away discreetly recording every word with her phone. In the age of social media, nothing venomous stays private for long. By morning, the video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, news blogs. It had gone viral in less than 12 hours under the hashtag number elite racism. Millions watched as Claudia's disdainful words replayed on loop. Parasites. Worthless beggars. They'll steal your wallet. The comments poured in like a tidal wave. Disgusting. She thinks being rich makes her better? Fire her. Boycott her company. Memes mocked her cruelty, videos dissected her prejudice, and strangers who had never heard of her name now knew it as synonymous with arrogance and discrimination. Claudia's phone buzzed relentlessly. At first, she ignored it, believing the storm would pass. But then came the call from Marcus, her boss at the luxury advertising agency. His voice was clipped and cold. Claudia, you're terminated effective immediately. Our clients are furious. Contracts are being cancelled because of your comments. We can't risk further damage to the company's reputation. The line went dead before she could protest. Panic surged. She dialed her closest friend, Amanda, who had always been her confidant in the city's elite circles. Amanda's voice was colder than Marcus's. Claudia, you've embarrassed us all. Do you understand? The other girls don't even want you near our events anymore. You've made us look complicit. Don't call me again. One by one, the pillars of Claudia's carefully curated life crumbled. The club revoked her membership. Invitations to exclusive galas evaporated. Her so-called friends stopped answering her calls. Even her two roommates, furious at the constant harassment from reporters outside their building, demanded she move out immediately. In a matter of days, Claudia went from being the glamorous girlfriend of one of the city's most admired businessmen to a pariah, shunned and ridiculed. Paparazzi hounded her, capturing every tear-streaked face, every disheveled walk through the grocery store. Online, commentators reveled in her downfall. This is what happens when privilege thinks it's untouchable. Meanwhile, the very man she had mocked, Alexander, was living a different story. Photographs circulated of him walking beside Elias through the campus of Columbia University. The boy, once dismissed by Claudia as worthless, was making headlines as a prodigy who had taught himself 3 languages while homeless. Professors praised him as an extraordinary talent, newspapers ran features about his scholarship, and students called him an inspiration. The contrast could not have been more brutal. While Claudia hid in her apartment, curtains drawn, scrolling through hateful comments, Elias stood at a podium, delivering his first speech as Columbia's newest scholarship recipient. His voice, humble yet firm, carried a message that resonated with thousands. Your circumstances do not define your worth. What matters is the character you choose to carry with you. Alexander sat in the front row, tears in his eyes, watching the boy who had reignited his faith in humanity. For him, Elias was not just a student, he was living proof that compassion and opportunity could change the course of a life. For Claudia, watching from the isolation of her tiny apartment, it was unbearable. She saw the photos, the applause, the words of admiration for a child she had ridiculed. And she saw Alexander beside him, proud and fulfilled in ways he had never been with her. Bitterness gnawed at her. She told herself it wasn't fair, that she had been provoked, that her words had been twisted. But deep down, she knew the truth. No one had forced those words from her mouth. They had spilled out because they were part of her. And now the world knew exactly who she was. The irony was suffocating. Claudia had spent years climbing into the inner circles of wealth and prestige, only to lose it all in a matter of days. Not because of bad luck, but because she had revealed her true self. Her downfall was not an accident. It was justice, swift and merciless. As she sat alone one evening, scrolling through the endless stream of online condemnation, she stumbled upon a photo of Elias in the Columbia Library. He was holding a stack of books, smiling shyly as Alexander placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. The caption read, "Real privilege isn't wealth, it's recognizing talent and having the humility to nurture it." Claudia closed her laptop with trembling hands. For the first time in years, she felt the crushing weight of emptiness. Not just the loss of her job, her friends, or her status, but the molen of her Screvensons. Loss of the chance to have been better. She could have chosen compassion. She could have shared in Alexander's pride, in Elias's rise. Instead, she had chosen prejudice, and it had left her with nothing. Her glamorous life was gone, replaced by 4 bare walls, and a part-time job at a call center. And outside, the world continued to celebrate the boy she had once dismissed as worthless. Claudia had fallen, not because of Elias, not because of Alexander, but because of herself. And though she tried to tell herself that one day she would rise again, deep down she knew nothing could erase the truth the world now saw so clearly. The weeks that followed marked the beginning of a transformation no one could have predicted. Elias, once a quiet boy surviving on scraps of food and borrowed books, now walked the halls of Columbia University with a sense of awe. The library became his sanctuary. He spent hours poring over texts in multiple languages, his mind hungry for knowledge that had always been just out of reach. Professors quickly noticed that he wasn't simply memorizing lessons. He absorbed concepts, connected ideas across cultures, and questioned theories with the sharpness of someone who had long studied life itself. For Alexander, watching this growth was nothing short of miraculous. Every time he saw Elias engaged in animated discussion with a professor or helping another student understand a difficult passage, his heart swelled with pride. It reminded him of Daniel, who had always been more concerned with others' happiness than his own. But unlike the haunting memories that once left Alexander hollow, Elias's presence brought a healing warmth. This wasn't about replacing his son. It was about honoring his memory by nurturing someone equally gifted with kindness. Soon, Elias's talent became impossible to ignore. He excelled in every class, often setting records on exams, and his essays on literature and justice were so compelling that professors began submitting them to academic journals. Word of his brilliance spread across campus. And students who once eyed him with curiosity now sought him out for guidance. Elias, humble as ever, always responded the same way. If I can help, I will. But Elias's success wasn't limited to academics. He began volunteering at community centers. On weekends, teaching younger children basic reading and language skills. He shared his own story quietly, not to draw sympathy, but to inspire them. I learned from books people threw away, he would tell them. If I could do that, imagine what you can do with all the tools you already have. The children adored him, and parents praised his patience and sincerity. Alexander, seeing the impact Elias was already making, knew it was time to do more. He called a meeting with his legal and business advisors and announced the creation of the Elias Foundation, a program designed to provide scholarships and mentorship for underprivileged youth with extraordinary potential. The foundation's mission was simple: no child with talent and determination should ever be held back by poverty. When Alexander unveiled the foundation publicly, Elias stood by his side, nervous but radiant. Reporters swarmed, eager to capture the story of the street boy who had risen to academic prominence. One journalist asked Elias what he thought made his journey possible. His answer was quiet, but it carried across the room. It wasn't just me. It was the belief that someone finally had in me. When Mr. Alexander said I belonged at that restaurant, in that university, in this world, it changed everything. Sometimes all a person needs is a chance. The words resonated deeply. Newspapers ran with the headline, "From Sidewalks to Scholarship, Elias Santos inspires a city." His face became symbolic of resilience, his story a testament that greatness could emerge from the unlikeliest places. Meanwhile, Claudia watched all this unfold from the shadows of her diminished life. Once, she had mocked Elias as worthless. Now, the world celebrated him as an inspiration. But Elias never spoke of her bitterness. He didn't need to. His success was his response, his triumph, louder than any insult. What struck people most about Elias wasn't just his intelligence, it was his unwavering humility. At the award ceremony, where he was named Columbia's Outstanding Freshman of the Year, he stood at the podium, holding back tears. "I know what it feels like to be invisible, to feel as if the world doesn't care whether you succeed or fail. But I also know this. Your worth is not determined by where you come from, but by the choices you make every day. Choose kindness. Choose perseverance. And when life gives you even the smallest opportunity, seize it with everything you have." The hall erupted in applause. Alexander, seated in the front row, wiped tears from his eyes. For him, this moment was more than recognition of Elias's success, it was proof that compassion could ripple outward, changing lives in ways even wealth couldn't predict. And so, Elias's rise became more than a personal victory. It became a movement, a reminder to all who heard his story that dignity and potential live in every human being, waiting only for belief and opportunity to bring them into light. Fate has a mysterious way of weaving lives together. Months after Elias began his studies, Alexander uncovered a detail that left him breathless. Elias had been born in the very same hospital as his late son Daniel, on the very same day, at nearly the same hour. It was as if life itself had drawn an invisible thread between the boy he had lost and the boy who had now stepped into his world. For Alexander, it was no longer coincidence, it was destiny, a second chance wrapped in the form of a child who carried both brilliance and compassion. While Elias rose higher awarded honors, inspiring young people through the foundation, Alexander built in his name Claudia descended into obscurity. Once the face of glamour and privilege, she now lived in silence, stripped of status and friends, her own words having exposed the emptiness within her. The contrast was striking. One life dimmed by prejudice, another illuminated by perseverance and hope. The story's message could not be clearer. True worth is never measured by wealth, beauty, or privilege. It lies in the courage to dream, the resilience to endure, and the kindness to lift others even when you have little yourself. Elias proved that no background, however humble, can silence a heart filled with purpose. And Alexander's transformation reminds us that choosing compassion over judgment can alter not only another's future but also heal our own wounds. Sometimes the people we are meant to meet arrive not by accident but by destiny. They challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of who we were always meant to be. Never Underestimate the power of kindness. Because while prejudice destroys, compassion builds. Legacies. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe destiny places people in our path for a reason? Share your feelings below. And if you want more stories of hope, resilience, and life-changing encounters, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell because the next story might just inspire you in ways you never imagined.